The signal came in already broken, and the cutter was already turning before I gave the order. That is the part the inquest never understood. By the time I crossed the bridge from the chart table to the comms rail, Quill had her hand flat on the band that nobody on this ship had listened to in 11 years, and the Greywater's bow was 4 degrees off our patrol heading and still swinging. "Talk to me," I said. "I don't know what I'm hearing, Commander." Petra Quill did not look up. She was a careful woman, slow to alarm, and the fact that her voice had gone thin told me more than the waveform on her screen. "It's on the old emergency monitor, the dead one, the one we keep powered because nobody ever signed the order to stop." I leaned over her shoulder. The waveform was wrong in a way I had never seen in 22 years of patrol work. A distress carrier has a shape you learn to read like a face, the carrier tone, the repeat structure, the little machine patience of a beacon saying the same thing over and over because it has nothing else to do but wait. This had 2 faces. They were laid on top of each other, fighting for the same channel, and where they overlapped the signal tore itself into static. 2 beacons keying the same frequency, I said. "That's what it looks like, but it can't be." Quill tapped the spectral plot. "Different timing, different drift. They're not even from the same bearing. Look at the Doppler. The smear is huge. One's coming toward us and one's falling away. They merged somewhere out there before they ever reached us. They merged and then they bounced. Behind me, the deck lights shifted from white to the pale amber of a quiet alert, and I heard the captain's boots on the ladder before I heard her voice. Iris Solano came onto the bridge buttoning her collar, hair still flat on one side from her rack, and she had the look she always had when she'd been woken by a tone instead of a man. Fully present, slightly annoyed, already 3 moves ahead. She had captained the Greywater for 6 years and me as her executive officer for 4 of them, and in that time I had learned that her first instinct was almost always right, and her second guess almost always wrong, which is a dangerous thing to know about a person you have to argue with. "Status," she said. "Distress carrier on the dormant monitor band," I said. Garbled. "Quill thinks its 2 sources merged before reception." I agree with her. Solano came to the rail and read the plot the way she read everything, fast and once. "One source," she said. "One ship breaking up. When a hull cracks, the beacon antenna whips around and you get exactly that. 2 Dopplers off one platform, the structure tumbling, the tone smearing. I've seen it twice. It's one ship and it's coming apart right now." "The repeat intervals don't match," Quill said quietly. "The repeat intervals don't match because the timing circuit is being torn apart with the rest of the ship." Solano straightened. "Helm, you've already got us turning." "Good. Steady up on the strongest return and give me everything the reactor will hand you. If a hull's coming apart, there's a clock on it and the clock is short." This is the moment the inquest circled for 3 days. So let me set it down plainly. She was not wrong to read it as one ship. Everything she said was a real thing that really happens. A good captain pattern matches to the thing she has survived before, and Solano had pulled people out of 2 tumbling wrecks and the memory of those saves was in her hands. If I had been a junior officer, I would have said aye, and we would have run hard at the strongest return, and we would have done a clean, brave, completely wrong thing. But I had been staring at the smear for 90 seconds and something in it would not sit still. "Captain, hold the burn," I said. 30 seconds. "Quill, split the channel. Run the merged carrier through the old separation filter, the one in the legacy package, the multi-source one. Nobody's used it because nobody's needed it, but it's still loaded." Solano did not love being told to hold a burn over a clock. I watched her weigh it. The thing about Iris Solano is that she would let you argue briefly if you had a reason and not just a feeling, and she could tell the difference across a dark bridge. 20 seconds, she said. "Quill, do it." The legacy separation filter was old human software, written for a galaxy that no longer existed, back when our listening posts strung the dark like fishing floats, and the assumption was that you would always eventually hear more than one voice at a time. It had been carried forward in every system build since, out of nothing but institutional habit, a line of code that no one wanted to be the one to delete. Quill loaded it, fed it the merge carrier, and for a moment the screen went to noise. Then it came apart into two carriers, 2 beacons, 2 timing structures, clean now, side by side. 2 ships, son of a bitch, Solano said, very softly, which from her was an apology. 2 ships, I said, 2 distress calls. They keyed the same band by accident, different sectors, and the carriers crossed somewhere out in the deep and rode in together. I was already reaching past Quill for the bearing solution, and neither one of them is on a vector we can reach with a single hull. Look, this one's almost dead ahead and decelerating toward us. Relative slow close, maybe 40 minutes if we burn now. That one's high and falling away, the opposite side of our cone, and it's not slow, it's running away from us at a clip. We chase one, we lose the other. The bridge was very quiet. Helm had taken his hands off the throttle without being told. Where are they sending it? Solano said. It was not really a question. She had already seen the routing tag in the corner of the separated signal, the same place I had seen it, and her voice had changed because of it. Both of them are addressed to Coalition Rescue Command, relayed through a Coalition watchtower, I said. Tall hold, the beacon station out on the mail shelf. Neither one of them is hailing us. Neither one of them knows we're here. We're not on either address line. They're not even talking to anybody human. I straightened up and looked at her across the plot, at the two clean carriers sitting where there had been one torn mess. They beamed these at their own people. We just happened to be parked under the spot where the two beams crossed. And their own people, Solano said, are answering both, presumably. Then we'd be hearing the handshake, Quill said. Coalition Rescue squawks an acknowledgement the second it logs a Mayday. It's automatic. There's no acknowledgement on either carrier. Both of these have been going out unanswered. She checked the timestamps and her jaw tightened. The near one's been calling for 19 minutes, the far one for 40-some. Nobody's picked up. 40 minutes is a long time to call into the dark and hear nothing come back. Solano stood with both hands on the rail, and I watched her do the arithmetic that command exists to do and that nobody ever thanks you for. 2 ships, 1 cutter. One of them close and slowing, which meant it was either trying to hold together or trying to make a rendezvous it would never make. One of them far and fleeing, which meant it had power and a heading and a reason to run. A captain who chases the near one is choosing the sure save over the long shot, and no board on earth would fault her for it. A captain who chases the far one is gambling everything she can reach on the hull that might already be the more salvageable, and losing the near one for certain. Either choice was a death sentence she'd be signing for people she had never met, who had never asked her for anything, who did not know her ship existed. What are they, she said. Can we read the manifests off the beacon data? Quill bent to it. This is the work people don't picture when they imagine a rescue, a woman in a quiet room reading machine telemetry off a torn signal, trying to learn who is dying before deciding whether she can stop it. Near one identifies as a bulk ore hauler, Coalition Registry. Senmaru, reactor casualty, she's bleeding neutrons, the beacon's flagging containment. That's why she's slow. She's not slowing to dock, she's slowing because she's killing her own drive before it kills her. Crew complement reads small, 20, maybe 22. And the far one? Quill was quiet for a moment longer than the data should have taken. Far one's a passenger transport, she said. Not Coalition flag. Renat Registry, that's a client species. They ride the Coalition lanes under escort. Transport Corval. Hull breach, decompression in progress. She's running for the nearest atmosphere she can find because her captain knows she can't hold pressure. Quill looked up at last, and the careful slowness was gone out of her entirely. Complement reads 310. It reads families, Commander. The transponder's flagging dependence. That's a lot of children on a ship that's losing its air and running away from us as fast as it can go. Nobody said anything for a moment. The amber light sat on all of us. So those are the choices, Solano said. 22 on the one we can reach. 310 on the one we can't. She did not raise her voice. She never did at the worst moments. And the galaxy that owns both of them has not answered either. That's the board, I said. Then I want a third option, she said. And I want it in 90 seconds. Because in 90 seconds the geometry decides for us. She turned from the rail. Brant, you found the 2. Find me the way to be in 2 places. Quill, raise that watchtower. I want to know why Coalition Rescue is letting 2 of its own scream into a dead channel with nobody picking up. Helm, split the difference and hold. Don't commit the burn. Keep both inside our cone as long as the physics allows. Move. The way to be in 2 places is the oldest trick the old network ever knew, and it took me 40 of my 90 seconds to remember that we still had the means to do it. Quill, I said, what else is out here that we can talk to? Not Coalition assets, ours. Anything human, anything dormant. Anything that ever answered to the old relay codes. The Greywater can't reach both ships. But the Greywater isn't the only thing parked under the dark out here. Quill's hands went still over the console, then started moving fast. There's the relay chain, she said. The old quiet chain, the buoy string. It's mostly dead, but the carrier's still up. We ride it for navigation fixes. Nobody talks on it. If anything human is out here, it'd be hung on that chain, listening same as us. She pulled up a different display, one I had not seen lit in years. A sparse scatter of cold green markers strung across a quarter of a sector. Greywater, 3 survey buoys, and there, holding station 2.5 light minutes off the far transport's run line. Tagged as a deep survey ship, human registry. The Quillon. What's a survey ship doing out here, Solano said. Mapping. Long mapping run, the kind that takes a year and a half, and goes nowhere near anybody. They've been out so long they probably don't know the band's hot. They're not monitoring distress, they're counting rocks. I was already doing the geometry in my head, and it was ugly and it was possible. But she's on the far transport side of the cone. If she breaks her mapping pattern right now and runs, she can intercept the Corvail's flight path before the Corvail runs out of air. We can't reach the transport, the Quillen can. A survey ship isn't a rescue platform, Solano said. She won't have the pumps, the patch crews, the medical. Neither did half the ships that ever pulled anybody out of anything, I said. She's a hull with engines and people on it who can hear. That's the whole job. That's all we are too. I looked at her. Captain, I'm not asking to abandon the near ship. I'm asking to take the near ship ourselves, the reactor, the 22. We can do that, that's a Tuesday, and hand the far ship to the Quillon. We sort the merge call back into 2 calls and we answer both, 1 each. For a moment, Solano just looked at the 2 cold green markers. The Greywater and the Quillon, sitting on opposite sides of a problem that had arrived as a single torn scream. Do it, she said. Brant, you've got the far ship. Clean up the Corval's Mayday, strip it to the manifest and the vector, and hand it to the Quillon on the quiet chain with our authority behind it. Make it an order they can't misread. Quill, you're with me on the near ship. Helm, now you commit the burn. Bring us onto the Senmaru and don't be gentle about it. The deck pushed up under my boots as the Greywater finally took her burn, and the whole ship seemed to exhale, the way a working hull does when the argument is over and there is only the work left. I went to the auxiliary station and started cutting the Corvail's call out of the wreckage of the merge. It is finicky, careful labor, and there is no glory in it. The 2 carriers had ridden entangled, and untangling them by hand meant separating telemetry that had been smeared together by 2 different drifts, and a relay that, I was beginning to suspect, had done some of the smearing itself. I pulled the Corvail's manifest clean. 310 souls, 81 of them flag dependents. A transport built for half that number, hull integrity falling through a floor with no bottom. I pulled her vector clean, heading, speed, the desperate shallow dive she was making toward a gas giant's upper atmosphere because thin bad air is better than no air. I bundled it with the Quillon's intercept solution and the Greywater's authority code, and I keyed it onto the quiet chain. Quillon! Quillon! This is the patrol cutter Greywater on the legacy chain I sent. You are the nearest hull to a transport in decompression, 310 souls, vector and intercept attached. Coalition rescue is not answering. We have the near casualty. You have the far one. Break your survey pattern and run. Acknowledge. Then I waited the way you wait, with your hand still on the key, as if pressure could make the answer come faster. 2.5 light minutes out and back is 5 minutes of silence minimum, and that is if someone is sitting at the board with their finger ready. Survey crews do not sit at the distress board. They have it switched to a buzzer in the galley if they have it on at all. I sent it twice more. I watched the Corvail's beacon on Quill's repeater, falling away, the decompression flag flickering as her pressure dropped and steadied and dropped. Again, wherever her crew were welding plate over the holes. Greywater, this is the watchtower tall hold. A new voice came up on the comms, on the coalition band this time, where Quill had been hammering. It was flat and formal and carried the particular weariness of someone who has been awake too long inside a failing machine. You are transmitting on a coalition emergency relay. Identify your authority. We have no record of a human vessel in this rescue district. I let Quill keep the near ship and took the watchtower myself, because that conversation was about to matter. Tallhold, Greywater, patrol cutter, I said. Our authority is that you've got 2 of your own ships dying on a band nobody's answering, and we're the only ones who picked up. The Sinmaru and the Corval, we have them. Why don't you? The pause that came back was not the pause of a man composing a denial. It was the pause of a man who has just been handed 2 facts he cannot fit together. Repeat your last, the Tallhold voice said. You said 2 ships. I said 2 ships. I sent him the clean carriers, both of them, the way Quill had separated them. 2 Maydays. They crossed in the deep and merged into one signal before either of them reached anybody. Did you log 1 or 2 or none? The silence on the coalition band this time had a texture I would come to know very well over the next hour. It was the sound of a man at a console realizing that the thing he had been looking at all night was not the thing it was. We logged 1, the Tallhold voice said at last. 1 distress carrier garbled unresolvable. Our buffer flagged it as a single damage source. Our separation routines they are not designed for merged multi-source events. We tagged it corrupt and held it for Rescue Command to adjudicate when a board came free, a breath. Rescue Command has had no board free for 11 hours. We are 9 ships down across the shelf this rotation. The list does not move. So that was the shape of it. 2 ships called for help. The call merged into a mess on the way. The Coalition's own watchtower could not pull the mess apart, could not even be sure it was a mess and not just one dying ship, and so it had done the only honest thing an overwhelmed system can do, which is to write the unsolvable thing onto a list and wait for someone with more capacity to look at it later. And later was not coming because the whole shelf was on fire and there was no later left to give. Tall hold. I said, we pulled it apart. We're going to answer both. We have the near one. A human survey ship is taking the far one. I need your traffic log on both hulls. Anything you've got, last known telemetry, crew rosters, whatever the beacons squawked before they tangled. We'll do the work. Just hand me what you've got. You, a patrol cutter, and a survey ship. The tall hold voice was not hostile. I want to be clear about that because the inquest tried hard to make it hostile and it never was. It was bewildered in a slow procedural way, a man reading a number off a gauge that should not read what it reads. Neither of you was hailed. Neither of you is on the district roster. Neither of you was sent. No, I said. We were just under the spot where the beams crossed. And you are answering both. That's the plan, I said. Your telemetry, tall hold. The clock's running on the near one. There was a pause, and then the data came across. Sparse, gap-toothed, the desperate handoff of a man who has decided to trust the strange ship because the strange ship is the only ship there is. I logged the Sinmaru's last clean reactor telemetry and shunted it to Quill, and even as I did the auxiliary board pinged, and the quiet chain came alive, and a voice I did not know came back across 2.5 light minutes of empty dark. Greywater, this is the survey ship Quillen. The voice was a young one, a woman, surprised out of months of routine and steadying herself as she spoke. We copy your traffic. We have the transport on our own scope now. We see her. She's diving. We are off our pattern and burning. Be advised, we are a mapping ship. We do not have rescue rigging. We have one medic and a hold full of core samples. A pause and then, steadier. We're going anyway. Tell us what we're flying into. I let out a breath I had not known I was holding. 310 souls, decompression. Families aboard, I sent back. You're flying into the worst day of your survey, Quillon. Don't slow down. We'll feed you everything we have. Greywater out to you. We've got our own on the line. And we did. 40 minutes off our bow, bleeding neutrons into the dark. The Saint Maru was waiting for a ship she did not know was coming. The run to the Saint Maru should have been the simple half of the day, and for 9 minutes it was. And then it stopped being simple the way these things always do. All at once and from a direction nobody was watching. Greywater, Saint Maru. Master Tool's baritone, tighter than before, revise our estimate. The crack jumped. We had a pressure transient in the secondary loop, and the seam ran 2 meters in under a minute. My engineer has it cold again, but the margin is gone. We do not have 26 minutes. We have perhaps 15, possibly fewer if it jumps again. Solano did not break stride. Helm, what does 15 minutes cost us? We can be alongside in 13 if I overburn, Okonkwo said from the helm. That puts us closing at a velocity I can't bleed off in time. We'd overshoot and have to come back, and the comeback eats the 13 we saved. Then don't overshoot, Solano said. Flip and decelerate now. Burn the back half hot. I'd rather arrive slow and breathing than fast and useless. The deck heaved as the Greywater spun on her axis and lit her drive against her own momentum. And the whole ship groaned with the load. And somewhere aft a stowage panel I had been meaning to have welded for a month tore loose and rang off a bulkhead like a struck bell. Tube crew, brace and rig wet. Dassler's voice came over the working channel. We're going in hard. The complication I had not budgeted for came up on Quill's board 90 seconds later, and it came up as a small bright contact separating from the Sen Maru's heat smear. She's launched her lifeboat, Quill said. I came back to her station. Tool, talk to me. Why is your boat away? The Matrix gave me a fragment of an argument before it gave me the master. There was Tool's voice, hard, and under it another, frightened. And the frightened one had a higher register that I would later learn belonged to a junior crewman barely past his apprenticeship, a boy who had heard 15 minutes in a cracked containment vessel and had done the arithmetic that fear does, which is no arithmetic at all. 3 of my crew panicked and took the boat, Tool said, and there was no excuse in it, only fact. It seats 8. They did not wait for the 8. They are 3 and they are away, and they are burning blind on a vector I did not authorize. I could not stop them without leaving the seam. A pause. Do not let my failure cost you. We are 18 now at the dorsal lock. Take the 18. The 3 made their choice. But the 3 had made their choice on a panicked vector, and a panicked vector out of a casualty is almost never a good one. And Quill had already pulled the lifeboat's track, and her face told me what the numbers said before she did. Their boat's heading is into the debris, she said. When the hauler vented her aft section an hour ago, she threw a shotgun pattern of hull plate out along that bearing. It's thin, but it's there, and a lifeboat has no sensors worth a name and no armor at all. They're flying blind into a field of their own ship. So now I had a 4th ship in a day that was already 2 ships too many, a lifeboat with 3 frightened souls off any plan, flying toward a hazard they could not see, while the gray water needed every second of her decel burn to make the hauler at all. I looked at Solano and she had already heard it, and she made the call without flinching, which is the thing she was for. "We can't chase the boat and make the hauler," she said. "Quill, can you fly the boat for them? Talk them through it. Feed them the debris pattern and walk them around it on the voice channel. You've got better eyes on it than they'll ever have. They're panicking, Captain. They may not even be on the channel." "Then make them be on the channel," Solano said. "Brant's got a survey ship full of geologists pulling off a tow he talked them into. You've got 3 scared crewmen in a tin can. Talk them down. Same job, smaller boat." So now we were running 3 rescues from one bridge. And Quill took the lifeboat, and I kept the Quillion, and Solano kept the hauler. And for the next several minutes, the Greywater's bridge was 3 quiet voices in the dark, each holding a different thread of the same unraveling day. Quill found the lifeboat's frightened pilot on a guard channel and did not waste a word on reassurance. She gave him bearings. "Come left 4 degrees. Hold. Now right 2. There is plate at your 1 o'clock, low, let it pass." She flew the boat through the shotgun pattern of its own dead ship with a stranger's hands on a console 2,000 kilometers away, and she did it in the same flat, unhurried register Dassler used on the boarding tube, the register that tells a terrified person that the calm professional on the other end of the line has done this 100 times even when she has never done it once. "Boat's clear of the debris," Quill said at last. "I've got them on a parking vector. They'll keep until we can collect them after the main evolution." She let out a breath. 3 for 3. Scared, but 3 for 3. "Good work," Solano said, "and to the bridge at large. And that is the last unplanned ship anybody on this watch is permitted to acquire. We are at our limit. Helm, status on the hauler. Diesel complete, Captain. We're slow and we're close. Coming up on the Sen Maru now." The Sen Maru came up on our scope as a smear of heat and a stutter of beacon light, and the closer we got, the worse she read. "Containment's going," Quill said. She had the reactor telemetry from Tallhold layered over our own returns now, and the picture was not improving. "She killed her main drive an hour ago to stop the breach spreading, which was the right call, but it means she's running on a battery and a prayer, and she can't maneuver. She's drifting ballistic and venting from a seam aft. Whatever her engineer did to buy time, the time's almost spent." "Hail her," Solano said. The Sen Maru's master came up on the voice channel ragged and clipped, and the translation matrix gave him to us in a flat machine baritone that could not carry the exhaustion underneath, but could not quite hide it either. His name, the matrix said, was Tool, and he was the master of a working ship, and he talked like one. No ceremony, no fear he was willing to spend air on, just the facts of his casualty laid out for whoever had finally come. "Unknown vessel, this is Sen Maru," he said. "We do not know your registry. We hailed Coalition Rescue. Are you rescue?" "No," Solano said. "We're a human patrol cutter. We caught your call by accident." "Rescue's not coming, Master Tool." "We are. Tell me about your reactor." A silence, and then the working ship part of him took over the disbelief and put it away for later, the way working men do. "Aft containment vessel is cracked. We have isolated the core, and we are running the seam cold, but the crack is growing. When it reaches the secondary manifold, we lose the seal and we lose the ship. We estimate a pause, a consultation off Mick, the matrix carrying a fragment of another voice, 26 minutes. Perhaps 30. We have 21 aboard. We have 1 lifeboat and it seats 8. 8 seats. 21 souls. That is the arithmetic of a cargo hauler, where the lifeboat is a regulatory afterthought bolted on by a line that never expected to use it, and I heard Solano take it in without a flicker. "You're not getting in the lifeboat," she said. "We're coming alongside and we're taking all of you off. 21 is nothing. We've got the room. What I need from you is to keep that seam cold for 26 more minutes and to have your people staged at your dorsal lock when we mate. Can you do that, Master Tool?" "We can do that." Something moved under the baritone. "Patrol cutter. You said you caught our call by accident." "We did. Stage your people, Solano out." She cut the channel and turned to the bridge. "Helm, lay us alongside her dorsal. Quill, get me the chief. I want the boarding tube rigged before we're stopped, not after." "Brant, where's your transport?" "Quillen's burning hard," I said. I had the survey ship's track in the corner of my board, a thin line lengthening toward the Corvail's diving run. She'll intercept in 19 minutes if her geometry holds. But she's flying into a decompression with 1 medic and no rigging. She's going to need to be talked through everything. That's going to be me, full-time, the second we're mated here. "Then mate here fast," Solano said. "It is a strange thing to run 2 rescues from 1 bridge, and I do not recommend it." For the next stretch, I had one ear on Master Tool's seam clock and the other on a survey ship full of geologists who had never in their lives expected to pull a single living body out of anything. And I learned that the hardest part of being the ship that answers is that you cannot be in the room. You can only talk to the people who are. We came alongside the Senmaru with the kind of seamanship that wins no medals because it goes exactly right. Our chief, a square man named Dassler who had rigged boarding tubes in conditions that would have killed lesser engineers, had the tube out and mated to the hauler's dorsal lock before our relative velocity had fully bled off, and the first of Master Tool's people came through into our receiving bay 40 seconds after the seal went green. I will not pretend I watched it. I was 3 compartments away with a headset clamped to my skull, walking a survey ship's bridge crew through how to receive a transport in decompression, and I caught the Senmaru's evacuation only in the reports that came up the line. Lock mated, first 8 across, second 8 across. Master Tool's engineer staying aft to nurse the seam clock at 11 minutes and falling. But I heard the receiving bay through the open channel, the sound of an alien crew coming aboard a human ship, the strange double step of beings built differently than us moving fast under our gravity, the chief's voice steady and unhurried saying this way, keep moving, you're aboard, and I have carried that sound a long time. Greywater Quillen, the survey captain's voice, tighter now. We have the Corvail on visual. She's bad. She's venting from 3 places along her spine, and she's still diving. Her master won't. Level off, he's chasing the gas giant's atmosphere. I think he means to belly into the upper cloud deck and let the pressure differential do his sealing for him. Is that even survivable? It's survivable if he does it perfectly and suicidal if he doesn't, I said. And he knows that better than we do, which is why he's doing it. It means he's already decided he can't hold pressure on his own. Quillen, you can't match a ship into an atmosphere. You have to take his people off before he dives, or you have to talk him out of the dive. Which is faster for you? A pause full of the sound of a young crew thinking hard and fast. We can't board him on his current vector, the Quillion captain said. We'd never match. But if we get alongside and put a line on him, we might be able to drag his bow up, bleed his dive, buy him altitude, give him time to come across to us instead of into the clouds. We've got the engines for it. We don't have the rigging. You've got survey rigging, I said. You've got core sample tethers and winch gear rated for pulling drill heads out of crust. That's a line and a winch. That's all a tow is. Quillen, I want you to listen to me very carefully, because nobody aboard your ship has ever done what you're about to do. And that doesn't matter, because it's just 3 things you already know how to do, done in a row, fast. And I talked them through it. I am not going to set down every word, because most of it was technical and dull, and that is exactly the point. The saving of 310 lives is mostly dull technical work done correctly under a clock, and the inquest's appetite for drama never quite forgave the recordings for how boring they were. I talked the Quillen survey winchmaster through rigging a drill tether as a tow line. I talked their helmsman through the geometry of laying a mapping ship alongside a venting transport without shearing both hulls. I talked their one medic through what decompression does to a body and what to look for when the Corvail's people started coming across. And the whole time, 4 compartments away, the last of the Senmaru's crew were crossing our boarding tube, and Master Tool's engineer was standing aft of a cracking containment vessel with his hand on a cold seam, counting. Tubes clear, all 21 aboard. Dassler's voice on the bridge channel, and then after a beat, correction, 20 aboard. The engineer's still on the hauler. He won't cross until the master orders the disconnect, and the master won't order it while his man's still aft. Tool, Solano said, on the open channel now so I could hear it too. Your ship is dead. Get your engineer off the seam. There is nothing left aboard worth 1 more minute of his life. He says the seam will hold if he holds it. Master Tool's baritone, very level. Says if he leaves it, the crack runs free and the ship goes up while your tube is still mated, and your tube is mated to my ship, Captain. He will not buy his own life with yours. I heard Solano go quiet, and I knew exactly the shape of the quiet, because it was the same quiet that had been on the bridge an hour earlier when she'd had 2 ships and 1 hull. There is a particular silence that comes when a stranger has just decided to weigh your life in the same balance as his own and has come down without being asked on the side of yours. Dassler, she said. How long to safe disconnect the tube and clear the hauler's blast radius? 90 seconds to disconnect clean. 2 minutes to be far enough that her going up doesn't matter. Tool, tell your engineer this, Solano said. We disconnect in 90 seconds whether he's across or not. He has 89 seconds to stop being a hero and start being a passenger. When that tube blows its seal, he is either on my ship or he is a man who died holding a wall that was going to fall anyway. There is no version of this where he saves us by staying. Tell him. The Matrix carried the exchange in fragments, Tool's voice, and under it another voice, younger, refusing, and then Tool again, sharper, not asking. And then Dassler's voice, flat with relief. He's crossing. He's across. 21 aboard. Blowing the seal, tubes clear, helm, get us off her now. The Greywater stood off the Senmaru hard, and we were 1,100 meters clear when the hauler's aft containment finally lost its argument with physics, and the ship came apart in a slow bloom that lit our hull and then faded into the dark, leaving nothing behind it but us, and 21 souls who an hour ago had been calling into a band that nobody human was supposed to be listening on. Greywater, Tallhold, the watchtower voice again, and this time it had a name attached to it, because in the gaps of the last hour I had asked for one, and the man had given it without quite knowing why. This is Watch Officer Oruvesh. I have your Sen Maru telemetry. Your signal return shows the hauler is gone. She's gone, I said. Her crew isn't. 21 aboard us, all alive. The master held his people together, and his engineer held the seam long enough for us to get them off. You can take the Sen Maru off your list, Oruvesh. Mark it recovered. A pause. Recovered. The Matrix gave the word back to me carefully, as if Oruvesh were turning it over to see if it was real. Our list does not have a column for recovered by a vessel that was not dispatched. I am writing it in the margin. Another pause. Greywater, the far ship, the Corvail. Is she also? Working on it now, I said. Stay on the line. Tallhold. You're about to watch something. I do not know why I said that. Maybe because Oruvesh had been alone in a failing watchtower all night writing dying ships onto a list that did not move, and a man like that deserves to see one come back off it. I patched the Quillen's channel onto the coalition band so the watchtower could hear, and I went back to the survey ship full-time. Quillan, talk to me, where are you? Alongside. The survey captain's voice had the flatness of someone past fear and into pure function. We're matching her dive, barely. We've got the tether across, your tow rig worked, the drill winch holds her. We're pulling her bow up. She's bleeding altitude slower now. But Greywater, her master's hurt. His bridge took a vent. The woman talking to me now is his second, and she's holding the ship together with both hands. The Corville spine is failing. We can drag her up, but we can't drag her far. We have to get the people across, and we have to do it before the spine lets go. How many across so far? None. We just got the line on. 310 people, and a survey ship with one medic, and a winch built for rocks, and a transport whose spine was coming apart in tow. I closed my eyes for a second in the dark of the auxiliary station, and then I opened them and did the only thing the ship that answers can do, which is to break an impossible thing into a list of possible ones. Then you don't bring them across a tube, I said. You don't have the time, and she doesn't have the spine to hold a mating load. You bring them across the tether, one line, hand over hand, in suits, with the winch taking up slack so nobody drifts. It's slow, and it's ugly, and it's how people crossed between hulls for 200 years before anybody invented anything better. How many suits have you got? A pause. Survey compliment. 40 hard suits. Maybe 60 soft ones in stores. 100 suits. 310 people, I said. So they cross in waves, and the suits come back on the tether each time. Children first. In arms, a crew member crosses with a child clipped to the harness, hands them off, the suit comes back. Wounded next. Then everyone else. You'll do it in 3 waves, and each wave is a knife edge, and you'll do it anyway. Because the alternative is, you do nothing, and 310 people fall into a gas giant in a ship with a broken back. Quillen, tell me you can run a tether line. We run tether lines every day, the survey captain said, and I heard the thing happen in her voice that I had been waiting for. The moment when a frightened crew remembers that they are not helpless, that the strange, terrible task in front of them is built out of ordinary tasks they have done 10,000 times. We pull samples up tethers off drill platforms in vacuum. That's the whole job. We just never pulled people. People are easier, I said. People hold on, go. What followed I could only hear, and I heard it in fragments across 2.5 light minutes of lag that made every exchange a small eternity. The survey crew rigged a transfer harness off their drill winch. The Corville's second officer staged her people at the breach where the tether crossed, and she did it in the dark, in falling pressure, with her master unconscious behind her and a gas giant filling the viewport below. The first crew member crossed with a child clipped to his chest, and the suit came back, and another went out. And the Corvail shed altitude the whole time while the Quillen's engine screamed against the dive, and the spine held, and the spine held, and the spine held. Tallhold, you getting this? I said, on the coalition band. I am recording it. Oruvesh's voice was strange now. Greywater. I have watched a great many ships die in this district. I have a procedure for it. I log the last telemetry, I note the time, I append the casualty to the district roster, and I forward the roster to a command that cannot read it fast enough to matter. That is my work. That is the entire shape of my work. A pause. I do not have a procedure for this. I am watching a survey ship that maps empty rockpool children across a tether out of a ship that should already be dead, on the instruction of a patrol cutter that was never sent, on a band my own station could not even resolve into 2 voices. There is no field on my form for any part of this. Then leave the field blank, I said, and watch. First wave across. The Quillen. ragged with effort. 41. All the children we could reach in the first pass and the crew that carried them. Sending the suits back. Corvale's second officer reports the spine is, she says she can feel it through the deck. She says, hurry. Then hurry, I said. Second wave. Wounded and the rest of the dependents. Go. It is a particular agony to manage a rescue you cannot touch. Separated from it by a wall of physics that turns every word into a thing that arrives too late to change. I could not pull a single one of those people across the line. I could only feed the Quillen's crew the next correct thing to do and trust them to do it. And they did, wave after wave, while the Greywater hung dead in space 1,100 meters off a debris cloud that had been an ore hauler, with 21 rescued aliens crowded into our receiving bay and Master Tool standing at the forward bulkhead watching our bridge through the open. Hatch as if he could not quite make himself believe the people running it were real. Second wave across, the Quillen said. 131 total. Spines failing. The second officer won't leave. She's running the breach. She says she goes last. A pause, and then, lower, Greywater, we're losing the dive. Her bow's coming down again, the spine's flexing too much to hold the tow load. If we pull harder, we'll snap her in half, and if we don't, she falls. We've got 179 people still aboard her and maybe 4 minutes of altitude. 4 minutes, 179 people. And I was light minutes away and could do nothing but talk. This is the part the inquest replayed most, and the part I least like to remember, because it is where I had to do the math out loud that command does not let you do silently. You cannot pull 179 people across a tether in 4 minutes. It cannot be done. The line moves at the speed it moves, and the arithmetic does not care how badly you want it to be otherwise. I had handed the Quillen an impossible thing and dressed it up as a list of possible ones, and the list had run out before the people did. Quillen, I said, cut the tether. A silence that had nothing to do with the lag. Say again, Greywater. Cut the tether and go under her, I said. You can't pull her up. So stop pulling, drop below her, kill your relative velocity, and let her settle onto your dorsal hull. You're a survey ship. You've got a flat back and hardpoints rated to hold drill platforms in a gravity well. Let her come down on top of you and take her weight on your hull and your engines together. You stop being a toe and you start being a floor. Her spine doesn't have to hold anymore because you're holding it. Then the people don't cross a tether. They walk down onto your back through the nearest breach and they're aboard. All of them, at once. That's the survey captain started and stopped, and I could hear her crew already moving before she finished the sentence. That's insane. We'd be flying a transport on our roof into a gas giant's gravity. If our engines flinch, we both go down. Then don't let them flinch, I said. Get under her, Quillen. You've carried mountains. Carry this. The lag made it worse. I gave the order, and then I had to wait 2.5 minutes to learn whether the survey ship had killed itself trying to obey it, and there is no clock slower than that one. Quill came and stood beside me at the auxiliary station, which she did not have to do, and Solano left the forward bulkhead and the silent regard of Master Tool, and came to stand on my other side, and the three of us watched the Quillen's telemetry crawl across 2.5 light minutes of dark. We watched the survey ship cut her tether. We watched her dive, deliberately, harder than the Corvale, getting below the falling transport. We watched her relative velocity bleed towards zero in a place where zero meant the two hulls were falling at exactly the same rate, which is the only way one ship can ever carry another. And then we watched the two return signatures merge into one and hold, and we did not know for the longest 2.5 minutes of my life whether they had merged because the Quillian had caught the Corvale on her back, or because they had struck each other and were falling together as a single ruined thing toward a planet that would crush them both. Greywater, Quillen. The survey captain's voice came up shredded with strain and absolutely level, the way a voice gets when its owner has decided that falling apart is a luxury for later. She's on our back. She came down on the dorsal hardpoints and we took the weight and we did not flinch. Spine's broken in 2 places, but it doesn't matter now because we're the spine. We are flying a transport on our roof and we are climbing. We are climbing, Greywater. We're going to make orbit. I do not know who started it. I think it was Quill. But the bridge of the Greywater, which is a quiet ship crewed by quiet people, made a sound it had never made in my 4 years aboard her, and Solano did not stop it. And on the coalition band Oruvesh of the watchtower Tallhold said nothing at all for a long time. Get them across to your interior, I said, when I could. All of them off the broken hull and into your pressure. Then climb to a parking orbit and hold. We'll bring the Greywater to you the second our own people are stable. We'll take the overflow, the wounded, anybody who needs more than your one medic. You did it, Quillen. You carried it. We had instructions, the survey captain said, and there was something in it that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Greywater, who are you people? We map rocks. We've been out here 1.5 years counting rocks. We turn on the distress band twice a year to check it still works. We checked it this morning. We never get anything. A pause. We got you. You got a wrong number, I said. 2 of them, actually. They weren't for us either. Climb to orbit. Quillen. We're coming to you. It took us 6 hours to gather the pieces of that day into something a report could hold. The Greywater closed on the Quillen's parking orbit, and we took aboard the Corval's wounded and the worst of the overflow, until our receiving bays and 2 of our holds were full of aliens of 2 species who had never met before that morning and were now alive together, aboard a human cutter that neither of their governments had sent. Master Tool's people and the Corval's people, the ore crew and the refugee families, and somewhere in the middle of it the Corval's second officer, who had come across last as she said she would, with her master breathing on a survey ship's single cot and 310 of her 310 souls alive. 310 of 310. I checked the number 4 times because I did not believe it, and then I stopped checking it because the inquest would check it for me. And they did, and it held. Not one of the Corval's people was lost. 2 of the Senmaru's crew had injuries that would keep them in a real hospital for a season, and Master Tool's engineer had a hand he would not fully use again, the one he had kept on the cold seam. But everyone who had been alive when the merge signal crossed under our bow was alive when the sun came up on the watchtower's clock, and that is a sentence I have only been able to say a handful of times in a long career, and I have never once said it about a call that was meant for me. Oruvesh stayed on the line for most of those 6 hours. He did not have to. His watchtower had no role left in any of it. The ships were recovered, the people were aboard. The only thing left for a watch officer to do was file the roster and sleep. But he stayed, and we talked in the gaps, the way 2 men on opposite sides of a long night talk when the emergency has passed and the disbelief has not. I have served on the Tallhold Beacon for 19 years, he told me, somewhere in the 4th hour. I have logged the loss of more ships than I can hold in my mind at once. The Shelf is a hard district. Rescue Command is good, and Rescue Command is overwhelmed. And the gap between those 2 facts is the place where I have spent 19 years writing names onto a list. A pause. I have a clear understanding of how this works, Commander Brandt. A ship calls. We log the call. We dispatch what we have, and what we have is never enough. And the ships we cannot reach we mourn and we record. That is the system. It is an honest system. It does its best. I'm not arguing with your system, Oruvesh. You are not. That is what I cannot fit. His Matrix voice was slow and careful. Both of those Maydays were addressed to Coalition Rescue. Both rode through my relay. My relay merged them because my relay is old and overtasked and could not resolve a multi-source event, and so what reached the network was one corrupt signal that the network correctly identified as unsolvable and correctly set aside. Every part of that was correct. Every part of that was the system working as designed. A long pause. And then the unsolvable signal leaked off the relay onto a band that the Coalition decommissioned as dead before I was born. And the only thing in the entire sector that was listening to a dead band was a human patrol cutter that no one sent and a human survey ship that maps rock and turns on its distress receiver twice a year. We did not route it to you. We could not have routed it to you. The band you heard it on is not on any chart we keep. You were not supposed to be able to hear it at all. And yet, I said, and yet you heard 2 ships in a signal we could not even hear as 2, Oruvesh said, and you did not choose between them. That is the part. I keep returning to that part. You had 1 cutter and 2 ships, and the lawful, sensible, defensible thing was to save the ones you could reach and mourn the ones you could not, the way I have done for 19 years. Instead, you sorted the call back into 2 calls, and you went looking through a dead network for a second hull so that you would not have to leave, half of it unanswered. The Matrix gave me the next words very flatly, which I have come to understand is how that species carries the things it cannot say any other way. We did not send the call to you. You answered the part of it we did not even know we had sent. I did not have anything to say to that, so I said the only true thing I had. You'd have done the same, I said, if you could have heard it. You were listening all night, Oruvesh. You just had the wrong receiver. Perhaps, he said. But I would have heard 1 ship, you heard 2. A pause. Send me your separation routine, Commander. The old multi-source filter. If my relay had carried it, this would have been my save and not yours, and that is how it should have been. I would like it to be how it is the next time. So somewhere in the 5th hour, I sent a 19 years tired alien watch officer a piece of human software older than both our careers, a filter written for a galaxy of fishing float listening posts that no longer existed, carried forward in every system build since out of nothing but the refusal to be the one who deleted it. He acknowledged receipt. He told me he would have it loaded onto the Tallhold relay before his next rotation, and onto every relay on the shelf within the month if Rescue Command would let him, and I believed him, because by then I had spent a long night learning that Oruvesh was the kind of man who writes recovered into the margin of a form that has no column for it. Master Tual found me in the receiving bay near the end of the 6th hour, when the worst of the work was done and the strange business of having 230 alien survivors aboard a cutter built for 40 had settled into the duller business of feeding them and counting them and finding them places to sit. He had cleaned himself up, which is its own kind of statement from a man who has just lost his ship. He had put the working master back together to come and stand in front of me, and the translation matrix gave me a voice that had its exhaustion back under control. You did not choose, he said, no greeting. The ore hauler economy with words. When you found 2 of us, you did not choose between us. My second engineer overheard it on your bridge channel before we crossed. He said the human captain wanted to run for the strong signal, and you held the burn to look for a second voice in the noise. He studied me with eyes set wrong for a human face, and I have learned to read those eyes a little since, and what was in them was not gratitude, or not only. It was the thing Oruvesh had on the comms. It was a man trying to make 2 facts fit. Why did you hold the burn, Commander? You did not know there were 2 ships. You only suspected. The sensible thing was to run for the one you could see. My captain pattern matched to a wreck she'd survived before, I said. I pattern matched to a smear I'd never seen. Between the 2 of us, we got lucky. That is not an answer. It was not, and he knew it, and I owed him a real one for the engineer's hand, and so I gave him the only real one I had. Because if I'd run for the strong signal and I'd been wrong, I said, then somewhere out there a second ship was going to keep calling into the dark until it stopped, and I was going to spend the rest of my career not knowing whether I'd left it. I've left ships before, Master Tool. Everybody in this trade has. You only get to do it when there's truly no other hand to play. I wasn't sure there wasn't another hand, so I looked. I shrugged, which the Matrix could not translate, and which he watched anyway. Turned out there was a survey ship. There's almost always something out here if you're willing to look for it before you decide there isn't. Tool was quiet for a moment. We hailed our own, he said. Coalition rescue. The proper channel, the proper code. We did everything correctly, and our own people did not come, because our own people are 9 ships down and drowning. I want to be clear that I do not blame them. The shelf is a hard district. He paused, and the next words came slowly. But it was not my own people who came. It was a ship I had no name for, listening to a band that does not appear on any chart I have ever read, that pulled my call apart from another stranger's call and answered both. We did not aim our distress at Earth, Commander. We did not know Earth was a thing that aimed at distress, and Earth sorted us out of the noise and came anyway. Earth didn't come, I said. 1 cutter came, and 1 survey ship that maps rocks. We just happened to be parked under the spot where your beam crossed the core veils. That's all it was. Geometry and a receiver nobody turned off. You keep saying that. Tool's Matrix voice did something I had not heard it do. A small flattening that I think was the species version of a tired smile. You keep telling me it was an accident. An accident that you heard us. An accident that you heard too. An accident that you found a second ship. An accident that you carried a transport into orbit on a survey ship's back. He looked at me steadily. At some point, Commander, a sufficient number of accidents in the same direction is a thing a careful man has to give. Another name. I did not have an answer for that one either, so I went and found him a place to sit with his crew, and I left him to the long quiet that comes over rescued people in the hours after, when the danger is gone and the size of what nearly happened finally arrives. The coalition reached us 11 hours after the first save, in the shape of a proper rescue frigate that came on hard out of the shelf the moment a board finally came free, and her captain hailed us with the brisk confidence of a professional arriving on to find the emergency already over and somebody else's hull full of his survivors. His name was Rescue Master Cell, and he was, I want to be fair, a good officer in an impossible job. And the first thing out of his mouth once he had the count confirmed was thank you, said plainly and meant. The second thing out of his mouth was the question that would occupy the next 11 days of my life. By what authority, Rescue Master Cell said, did a human patrol cutter and a human survey ship conduct a rescue operation inside a coalition, emergency district without dispatch, without notification, and without a pause while he read something off his own board without, as far as my records show, any human vessel being authorized to monitor coalition emergency traffic at all? By the authority of nobody answering, Solano said before I could. She had come down to the receiving bay for the handover, and she stood with her arms folded and her flat on one side, hair finally combed, and she was not in a mood to be lawyered. Your 2 ships called for 11 hours and 19 hours respectively on a channel. Your own watchtower couldn't resolve. We could resolve it. We did. The authority is 231 people standing in my holds who'd otherwise be dead. You're welcome to file a grievance about the channel monitoring. I'll co-sign it. Rescue Master Cell looked at her for a long moment, and then he looked at the holds full of his people, and then he did the thing that I have come to respect coalition officers for, which is that he let the procedure go where the facts pointed instead of where the form wanted. There will be an inquest, he said. There must be. You have, by the kindest reading, conducted unauthorized operations in our space. By the unkind reading, you have demonstrated that the coalition has a band it cannot hear, an ally it did not know it had listening on it, and a separation capability its own rescue network lacks. He paused. I suspect the inquest will spend very little time on the first and a great deal on the second. Stand by to transfer survivors Greywater. And he stopped, and the brisk competence cracked for just a moment, the way Oruvesh's had, the way Tool's had. The way I was beginning to understand it cracked in everyone who had to look directly at the shape of the thing, and however you came to be under that spot, Commander. Thank you. I have been doing this work for 30 years. I do not have many days where the count comes out whole. You handed me one. The inquest convened on a coalition administrative platform out on the shelf, in a daylit chamber with a glass dome that showed the gas giant the Corvale had nearly fallen into, hanging huge and banded and serene above us as if it had never been hungry at all. They sat us at a long table, Solano and me from the Greywater, the Quillen's young captain, whose name was Mara Idris, and who looked older than she had 11 days before, and a recording stack that hummed in the corner. Across from us sat 3 coalition adjudicators, and at the far end where the witnesses sit, Oruvesh of the Tallhold Beacon and Rescue Master Cell and Master Tool of the Lost Senmaru, and behind a partition that they thought we could not see through, the Corval's second officer, a Renat woman named Sievin, who had run a breach in falling pressure with her master dying behind her and had not left until the last of her people, was across. It was the most thorough proceeding I have ever sat through, and I want to record that it was fair. The coalition does not do inquests to assign blame, or not only they do them to understand, with a patience that a faster people would call plotting and that I have come to call wisdom. They walked the whole night through, hour by hour, transmission by transmission, and they made us account for every choice. And the accounting was the point. It went the way these things go for a long time, the dull, careful reconstruction of a thing that had been anything but dull to live. And then the senior adjudicator, an old coalition jurist named Avery with the gray ridged skin of Oruvesh's species and a manner like cold water, laid down the recording of the first 90 seconds, the merge signal, the torn carrier, Quill's voice saying, "I don't know what I'm hearing," and asked the question the whole proceeding had been walking toward. Commander Brandt. Your captain identified this signal as a single vessel breaking apart. Her identification was consistent with the data and with her experience. You overruled it. Ever's matrix voice was even. On what basis? You had no more data than she did. You had less experience than she did. By your own testimony, you acted on, and I quote your log, a smear that would not sit still. Explain to this inquest why we should build a finding on a smear that would not sit still. You shouldn't, I said. You should build it on the separation filter. The smear's just what made me run the filter. Anybody can have a wrong feeling about a signal. My captain had a right feeling about it that happened to be wrong, which is worse, because right feelings are the ones you trust. The only thing I did that mattered was refuse to commit before I'd run the tool that could tell us for certain. I didn't know there were 2 ships. I knew I didn't know. That's the whole of it. I held the burn for 20 seconds and ran a piece of software. A piece of software, Ever said, that the Coalition Rescue Network does not possess. A piece of software, I agreed, that the Coalition Rescue Network doesn't possess. Yes. There was a silence in the daylit dome, and I watched the 3 adjudicators look at each other. And I understood that we had arrived, by the long plotting road, at the thing the inquest was actually about, which was never us at all. Watch Oruvech. Ever turned to the far end of the table. Your relay merged the 2 signals. Your station flagged the result as a single corrupt source. Your network correctly set it aside as unresolvable. Was any part of that procedure incorrectly performed? Oruvech stood the way the careful stand, slowly, with both hands flat on the table, no adjudicator. Every part was performed correctly. That is the difficulty. I have reviewed it 19 times. There is no step at which I, or my station or rescue command failed in any duty as that duty is written. He paused. The Maydays merged because 2 carriers crossed in deep space, which is rare but lawful physics. My relay could not resolve them because my relay does not carry a multi-source separation routine. Because no coalition relay carries one, because the coalition's emergency architecture was built on the assumption that a distress call has 1 sender. That assumption is correct in every case any of us has ever seen. It was incorrect this once. And the only instrument in the sector that did not share that assumption was a human cutter, listening to a band we declared dead. He looked briefly at me. We did not fail. Our entire understanding of what could happen simply did not include this. The human's understanding did. That is the finding adjudicator. The rest is detail. I had not expected to be defended by the alien whose station's gap had nearly killed 2 ships, and I think it surprised the adjudicators too, but Eva only inclined her head, because a fair proceeding takes the truth from whatever direction it arrives. And the survey ship, Eva said, turning to Mara Idris. Captain, you are not a rescue officer. Your vessel is not a rescue platform. You received an instruction across a relay you were not monitoring from a vessel you had never heard of, asserting an authority it did not possess over you. By any reading of your own service's regulations, you were free to ignore it. You did not. You broke an 18-month survey, risked your ship and your crew, and conducted a rescue your vessel was never designed to perform. The inquest would understand you better if you explained why. Mara Idris had been quiet through most of the proceeding, the way the young go quiet among the powerful, but she answered that one without a pause, and I have thought about her answer many times since. Because somebody was talking to me like I could do it, she said. Commander Brandt came across the chain and he didn't ask me if I was a rescue ship. He told me a rescue is just 3 things I already knew how to do, done in a row, fast, and he was right. It was, we pull mountains up tethers in vacuum every day. We just never thought of a ship as a mountain that could hold on. She looked down the table at me and then back at the adjudicator. Nobody sent me. That's true. But somebody believed I'd come, hard enough to spend the time sorting the call apart so there'd be a clean order to give me. You don't ignore that. I don't, anyway. Where I'm from, when somebody's that sure you'll answer, the least you can do is prove them right. The daylight moved across the dome. The gas giant turned. Eva wrote something, and the recording stack hummed, and I understood that whatever the finding said on paper, the real finding had just been spoken by a survey captain who counted rocks, and that it was the oldest finding there is. That the difference between a ship that answers and a ship that does not is sometimes nothing more than whether someone, somewhere, took the time to believe it would. They recessed after that, and in the recess Master Toole came and stood with us by the dome glass, looking up at the planet, and the Corval's second officer 7 came out from behind her partition because there was no longer any reason to pretend she was not there, and for a while the survivors of 2 ships that had never meant to call us stood together with the people who had answered, and nobody said very much. They will rule it lawful, Toole said at last, not as a question. Sel will see to it, and Vesh and the old jurist. They will find that you exceeded no authority because the authority was vacant, and that you breached no district because the district was not being held. They will write it carefully so that it sets no precedent the coalition is not ready to set. He paused. And then, very quietly, they will begin putting your filter on every relay on the shelf, and within a year they will be listening to the dead band themselves. And within 5 years there will be a clause in the rescue architecture about multi-source events, and no one will remember that it began with a smear on a human cutter's screen that would not sit still. He turned from the glass. That is how your kind changes things, I think, not by being thanked, by being copied. That's the goal, Solano said dryly. If everybody learns to hear 2 ships in the noise, we can go back to patrolling empty space, which is what we're actually paid for. Toole made the small flattening sound again, the tired species smile. You will not go back to empty space, Captain, he said. You have shown the shelf that the empty space was never empty. There was always a band, and there was always something listening on it. We simply did not know, until your cutter answered a call we never sent, how much of the dark had been quietly keeping watch. The recess ran long, the way coalition recesses do, and in the back of the daylit chamber I finally met the people the numbers had been standing in for. 7, the Corval's second officer, came and found me where I stood apart from the others, and she brought with her 2 of the dependents she had pushed across the tether in the first wave. Children, small and wide-eyed, and pressed against her legs in the way children press against the one adult who got them through the dark. The translation matrix gave me her voice low and even, the voice of someone who has decided that the breaking will come later, in private, where it belongs. My master is going to live, she said. Your survey ship's medic told me this morning. He took a vent burn to the chest, and a year ago on this district, with no board free, he would have died in a parking orbit waiting for a ship that could not come. She paused. He is going to live. I wanted to tell the people responsible to their faces, since the inquest keeps speaking of you as a procedural irregularity. We are a procedural irregularity, I said. They're not wrong. You are a procedural irregularity that has my entire manifest standing upright and breathing, 7 said. 310. I counted them onto your survey ship's deck myself, one at a time, as they came down off my broken hull, and I have counted them every hour since, and the number does not change. I have been a ship's officer for 30 years and I have never once brought a full manifest off a dying hull. Not once. The trade does not allow it. You always lose someone. It is the cost of the work and you learn to carry it. She looked down at the two children against her legs. I did not lose anyone. I keep waiting to find out who I lost. There is no one. I do not have a procedure for that either. I did not know what to say to her, so I crouched down to the children's level, which is a thing you learn to do, and I let them look at me. The strange being that had been a voice on a dead band, and one of them reached out and touched the back of my hand with two careful fingers, as if to confirm I was solid, and then withdrew, satisfied, and I have thought about that small careful touch more than I have thought about the whole inquest. You called your own people, I said to Seven, standing back up. You did everything right. Your master flew the dive perfectly and you ran the breach and you went last. None of this was because anybody did anything wrong. I want you to know that. We didn't save you because your people failed you. Your people were just buried, and we happened to be listening on a channel they'd stopped listening to. That's all it was. You keep telling everyone it was nothing, Seven said. An accident, a dead band, a spot where the beams crossed. Master Tool told me you do this. You make yourselves small, all of you, the whole night through, even your captain. She studied me with the steady regard I was getting used to. I think you do it because if you admitted it was a choice, you would have to admit you might have chosen otherwise. And that is a thing your kind cannot look at directly, so you call it geometry. She gathered the children. I will let you call it whatever you need to call it, Commander. I know what it was. I was on the broken hull. From where I was standing, it was not geometry. It was a voice that would not stop telling me my ship was a mountain that could hold on. Until I believed it. Across the chamber, Mara Idris and two of her survey crew stood apart by the dome glass, looking up at the gas giant they had nearly fallen into, and I went and stood with them, because they looked like people who needed someone to stand with them. They were geologists. They had signed on to map rock for 18 months in the emptiest space the human service could find, precisely because nothing ever happened there, and now they had a transport's worth of strangers' liners in their hands, and the strange hollow look of people who have not yet caught up to what they did. My winchmaster won't sleep, Mara said quietly. He keeps recalculating the load. He says the dorsal hardpoints shouldn't have held the Corval's weight in a gravity well. He's run it 9 times. By the numbers, the hull should have failed when she settled on our back. She turned from the glass. He's not wrong. The numbers say we shouldn't have been able to do it. The numbers usually say that, I said. About anything anybody ever actually did. The numbers are computed by people who weren't there and didn't have to. Your winchmaster had 310 people coming down on his roof, and he made the hardpoints hold because the alternative was unacceptable. And unacceptable isn't a load rating, but it's stronger than 1. I looked at her. You went, Captain. You broke an 18-month survey, and you flew a transport on your back into orbit on the word of a stranger. When the Coalition writes this up, they're going to call you an irregularity too. Wear it. It's the best thing anybody's ever going to call you. Mara almost smiled. We turned the band on this morning to check it still worked, she said again, as if she could not get past it. As if it were the hinge the whole world had turned on, which I suppose it was. If we checked it tomorrow instead of today. If we'd been one system further along the survey line. If your commander hadn't taken the time to sort the call apart so there was a clean order to give us instead of a garbled mess we'd have ignored. A lot of ifs, I said. There always are after. You can drive yourself off a cliff on the ifs. The only one that matters is that the band was on and somebody was sure you'd come. The rest is just the dark being the dark. I nodded up at the planet. It nearly had 310 people. It got core samples. That's a good trade. Take the win, Captain. They don't come whole very often. When the inquest reconvened, Oruvesh was the last witness recalled, and Aver asked him a final question that was not really for him, the way the best questions in those proceedings never are. Watch Officer Vesh. In your 19 years on the Tallhold Beacon, has the Coalition ever, to your knowledge, monitored the legacy human emergency band on which these signals were received? No, Adjudicator. We decommissioned it as dead before my service began. It is not on our charts. We did not know anyone monitored it. And does it trouble you, Ever said, that 2 of our ships were recovered on a frequency we had declared dead by vessels we did not send, because the only watch being kept on that band was a watch we did not know existed? Oruvesh was quiet for a long moment, and when he answered with both hands flat on the table, the way the careful do. It does not trouble me, Adjudicator, he said. It humbles me. There is a difference. I have kept a watch for 19 years on the bands we believed were the ones that mattered. It did not once occur to me that someone might be keeping watch on the bands we had stopped believing in. Not for us, not for anyone in particular, but simply because they had decided long ago never to stop listening to anything at all. He looked down the long table at me. We were not failed by our own. We were saved by someone else's habit of leaving the receivers on. I would like the coalition to learn that habit. It is the only finding I care about. The finding came down 4 days later, and it read exactly as Master Tool had said it would. Lawful. Authority vacant. District unheld. Operations justified by outcome. It set no precedent the coalition was not ready to set, and it buried in a subordinate appendix the recommendation that would actually change things. That coalition emergency relays be fitted with a multi-source separation capability, source human, and that a standing channel of liaison be opened with the human listening network regarding the monitoring of legacy bands. The appendix did not say the human listening network had not known until that week that the coalition considered the band dead. It did not say that we monitored it for no better reason than that no one had ever signed the order to stop. Some things an inquest is wise enough to leave out of the record even when it knows them. I read the finding in the Greywater's wardroom with Solano, and when I got to the appendix, she snorted and slid the reader back across the table to me. There it is, she said. We're going to spend the next decade as the coalition's accidental telephone operators because Quill never turned off a receiver. You never signed the order either, I said. Nobody ever signs the order, Solano said. That's the whole reason any of this works. Every Navy in history has a dozen systems still running because deleting them would require a person to take responsibility for the silence afterward. And no one will. She turned her cup in her hands. You held the burn. I want to say that on a day when there's no inquest recording it. You were right. And I was wrong, and I'd have committed us to one ship if you hadn't made me wait 20 seconds. And 179 people would have fallen into that planet while we pulled a hauler crew off a Tuesday casualty and felt good about ourselves. I trained you to argue with me. This is the one time I'm glad it took. You let me argue, I said. That's the part that worked. A captain who doesn't let her exec hold the burn for 20 seconds is a captain who saves one ship and never knows there were two. I shrugged. We got lucky and we got it right. Those aren't the same thing, and I'll take either. It was the closest Iris Solano and I ever came to thanking each other, and it was enough. The thing the finding could not capture, the thing I have carried longest, was the shape of the second save, the one I never saw, the one that happened 2.5 light minutes away on the back of a survey ship. On the strength of a cleaned-up call, I had forwarded down a dead chain to a hull that was never supposed to hear it, because that is the part that tells the truth about how it actually worked. The Greywater did not save the Corvail. The Greywater could not reach the Corvail. What the Greywater did was take a garbled scream that the galaxy's own watchtower had written off as one corrupt, unsolvable thing, sort it back into the two true calls it had always been, keep the one we could answer, and throw the other one further into the dark. To a survey ship counting rocks, on a network everyone had forgotten, with nothing behind it but our word that someone would come if she went. And someone did. Mara Idris went, the mountain held on. That is the misroute, and that is the answer to it, and they are the same act. The call was never aimed at us. It was barely a call by the time it reached us. It was the wreckage of two calls, smeared together by a tired relay and bounced onto a band that no chart admits exists. We did not deserve to hear it. We had no standing to answer it. And the only thing we did that the system could not do was refuse, on principle, to leave half of a signal lying in the noise once we knew the half was there. Oru Vesh wrote to me once more, a month after the finding, when his rotation came around again. He told me the tall hold relay carried the separation filter now. He told me that on his third night back, the new routine had caught something the old buffer would have merged. Not two ships this time, only one. But one his station could resolve cleanly and dispatch to fast, where a year ago it would have logged a corrupt source and set it aside for a board that never came. He told me the ship was recovered. He told me he had not had to write it in the margin. There was a column for it now. And he told me one more thing, in the flat, careful way his species says what it cannot say any other way, and I have kept the message, and I will set it down here because it is the truest account of this niche of work that I have ever been given by anyone, alien or human. I have understood since that night what your kind are, Oru Vesh wrote. I had thought before that you were simply present, that you happened to be under the place where our beams crossed, as you kept insisting, an accident of geometry and an old receiver. I no longer think it was an accident, though I also no longer think it was design. I think it is something your species does that has no word in my language. You leave the receivers on. You carry the old filters forward. You staff the dead bands and you keep the forgotten chains lit, not because you expect to hear anything, but because someone, someday, might call into the dark on the wrong frequency, to the wrong people, in the wreckage of a signal aimed at someone else. And you have decided, as a species ahead of time, that when that happens, you would rather have been listening. We build our rescue around the calls we expect. You build yours around the calls no one was ever supposed to make. That is the difference between us. I am trying to learn it. It is harder than the filter. I never wrote back anything worthy of that, so I wrote back the only thing that was true, which was, we just don't like turning things off. He replied with a single line, and I think it was his species' idea of a joke, and I have always chosen to read it as one. Yes, he wrote. I have noticed. The whole shelf is grateful that no one among you will ever sign the order. We went back to patrol. That is what happens after. When the survivors are transferred and the inquest is filed and the finding is appended, and the strange enormous day folds itself down into a page, a log. The Greywater put the shelf behind her and went back to the empty dark she was built for, and Quill kept the dead band powered, and nobody signed the order to stop her, and I expect nobody ever will. I filed the operational log myself because it was mine to file, and the form had a field for cause of contact, and I sat in front of that field for a while in the wardroom with the cursor waiting. There are codes for everything in a patrol log. There is a code for a hail, and a code for an intercept, and a code for a distress call received in the normal course of duty. There is no code for 2 distress calls that were aimed at someone else, that collided in deep space and merged into one corrupt signal, that bounced onto a band decommissioned as dead before I was born, that we sorted apart by hand and answered both, one with our own hull, and one by throwing the cleaned-up half of it down a forgotten chain to a survey ship that maps rocks. The form does not contemplate that. No form does. So in the field for cause of contact, I entered the only code that was honest, which was the code for signal received in error. And in the disposition field, where the form expected me to note that an erroneous signal had been logged and discarded per procedure, I wrote one word and I closed the log and I went to bed. The word was answered.